Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Cutting Edge Figure Skating Podcast. My name is Kim Dunaway, and in this episode, I'll be covering the ice dance and pairs events at 2025 Grand Prix Final in Nagoya, Japan. Both of these events had some controversy around the results that left a lot of fans unsatisfied, myself included. So let's get into the results. The winners of the pair event was Mira and Kihara of Japan. They win the short program, finish second in the free skate to win overall. I think this basically cements them as the favorites for the Olympic gold medal, which they pretty much already were, coming in as two-time world champions in this Olympic quad. They're also been undefeated for quite some time as well. A little unsatisfying because there were some mistakes in their free skate yet again. This is a team we've never seen skate clean. Even with those mistakes, they got a personal best in their free skate here, which was interesting. And they end up winning over a team, the Italians, that were clean in both segments of the competition. So I'm going to break that down a little bit when I get through talking about the top three in terms of what caused Mira and Kihara to still be able to win here. So in the short program, they were pretty clean. The biggest issue for them there was Riku's triple toe, which was called under. So they did get a base value lower than Conti and Mashi because of the undercall. They had level 4s on everything in their short program with the exception of their triple twist. Even though Conti and Mashi got a level 4 on their triple twist, the GOE was higher for Mira and Kihara, so there was very, very little difference really between that particular element. The free skate was really the bigger piece for me. The two errors here, there wasn't a fall, so it wasn't like a big major mistake. We had Ryuichi fall out of their second double axel in their 3-jump combo, which if you're going to mess up a jump in that combo, mess up the last one. It affects the GOE definitely less, and it's a big, huge scoring combination overall. But it was a mistake. They looked to me like they were still going to win based on that. They landed everything, and then she steps out of their last throw, their triple loop. She got really still, while it was negative GOE, they lost less than a point on that element. So they didn't lose a lot of GOE on that, which I thought was very generous. We see that at times. But I just kind of feel like if there's a mistake like that, they should lose at least a point on that element. It should not be less than a point. If you're going to lose half the value for a fall, I feel like a step out, turn out, hand down, those types of things should be at least -1 in GOE, in my opinion. Now, the way that it works is if you were going to give that a +3 and then they step out of it and that takes away 3 in your mind, then they could still give them a 0 for that and not any negative GOE at all. That's the way the scoring system works. I don't agree with it, but because of that, they didn't lose a lot on the 2 mistakes that they did, and they have a lot of extra points that they get for their lifts, which they're the team that gets the highest scoring lifts, at least in this competition here. And in pairs, lifts are your biggest point getters. So if you can do a really good group 5 lift, that can get you almost 10 points. Whereas if you mess up on a side-by-side jump, that element's base value is only 4.2 or 4.3 points, whether they're doing a Salchow or a toe. And a little bit of negative GOE on that doesn't affect it as if it did if they had a major issue on their lift. Really, the strategy for a lot of teams, even though there's been so much talk about the side-by-side jumps, especially if you think about a team like Gilardi and Ambrosini, who can't do 2 side-by-side triple jumps, or even a team like Deanna and Max, who really struggle with their side-by-side jumps a lot of the time, the big point getters are really in those lifts. And that's really what, pun intended, lifted Mira and Kihara to the title here versus Conti and Mashi, who were actually cleaner. Let's talk about Conti and Mashi, who had the best competition of their lives If they were to duplicate this at the Olympics, would a home field advantage carry them to an Olympic victory? Who knows? We'll find out. But they scored the best scores of their career in both segments of the competition. Their short program was fabulous. I've loved the short program all season. The only thing that I could pick on was just a little bit of hesitation on their lift. They got level 4s on everything except their death spiral. Very strong here. I thought they should have won the short program. They were literally a 10th of a point behind Miura and Kihara. They were within 8/10 of their PCS score, which again is fabulous for them. A lot of momentum here for them going into Europeans and, of course, going into a home Olympics. Their free skate, also incredibly strong. No mistakes, no negative GOE whatsoever, yet they were 3rd in the free skate. I would agree with him being 2nd behind Hasi and Volodin. I just did not agree with him being 3rd behind Miura and Kihara. Now, if we were to take a team 4 years ago like Sui and Han, who had a quad twist and a more difficult death spiral to make up for a potential mistake, which happened with Sui's triple Salchow. But they had 2 higher scoring elements in their program, therefore they had a higher base value in their program. In the case of Sarah and Nicolo, they're coming in at a little bit of a disadvantage with their base value because they do a throw triple Salchow instead of a throw triple Lutz or throw triple flip. What Miura and Kihara do is they do a throw triple flip, which is worth 5.3. The throw triple Salchow is worth 4.4. So it's almost a point that they gain on a team like Conti and Mashi in the free skate. Everything else they do is pretty much the same base value. Is that enough? Is that little 0.9 cushion enough to make up for a couple of mistakes? I don't think so, in my opinion. But here, unfortunately for them, it did, and they finished 2nd. They were very gracious about it, but I definitely felt like they should have won the short, and they should have been ahead of Miura and Kihara, or at least gotten a very similar score in the free skate, but I thought they should have been ahead. All right, let's talk about our 3rd place team here, Hasi and Volodin. This was my pick to win Grand Prix final. They have the last 2 seasons. They've always been very strong in the first half of the season and not as strong in the second half. And this season, they've started out this first half of the season not as strong, and so I'm hoping that we'll see their best come Europeans and Olympics. In the short program, and really the only issue for them across both programs was Minerva popped her triple Sal. We haven't seen that from her since their first season together. She had some issues with that triple Sal a lot in their first season, but it's really been rock solid for them the last couple of years. It's really shocking to see that. And of course, losing that element entirely in the short program with that just put them at a huge disadvantage going into the free skate. Because as I've mentioned before, in the short program, everybody's sort of working with the same tech content. They're all doing a throw triple loop or a throw triple flip. So again, there's like 0.3 points difference there, not as significant as the triple Salchow versus the flip or Lutz in the free skate. They're all doing a group 5 lift. They're all doing the exact same spiral. They're all doing spin. So everything really in the short program is based on level and grades of execution. So if you lose an entire element, that's at least going to put you 4 to 5 points behind everybody else. And Minerva and Nikita have the ability to score what we saw Miura and Kihara and Conti and Mashi score here, 77. We haven't seen them score super high, which has always been very surprising to me. I think this might have been the competition that maybe we would have seen a 77 kind of score out of them, but instead they were at a 70. So they were 7 points behind going to free skates. They really needed a lot of help that they didn't get. But they put, in terms of points, the best free skate that we have seen in this entire Olympic quad. 149 points is a ginormous score. It's a score that we haven't seen anybody else hit. We've seen a lot of 140s at this point from several teams. Maltik and Ambrolava, of course, Miura and Kihara, Conti and Mashi, Deanna and Max, Nairn and Fraser when they were competing. But we've not seen anybody get 150. And we still haven't seen anybody get 150, but this is as close as we have gotten. The only other team that we've seen get anywhere in that neighborhood is Sui and Han, who scored 155 points at the Olympics 4 years ago. And I don't think that they're going to return to that kind of a form. But I kind of felt like if they could get to a point where they could get high 140s, they would be competitive. And this particular competition really shows you that that's the level that they would need to get to in order to be competitive, because these top 3 teams here, to me, go into Milano as the favorites for the podium. The other teams behind them are all capable, but the way that these 3 teams are skating right now and the way that they've skated all the season, I think they've really elevated themselves above the other teams that are here, including Sui and Han, who were not here. Now, breaking down just elements by element so that you can sort of see what exactly caused Conti and Mashi to fall short of winning here. If you look at the elements, and I've got all the elements here with the exception of the death spiral, which all 3 teams scored very, very similar. It was not a lot of difference there. The twist, Hasi and Volin scored the best on the twist, then Conti and Mashi, then Miura and Kihara. Very similar to each other. The 3-jump combo, Hasi and Volin and Conti and Mashi scored a lot better here than Miura and Kihara because they had that mistake on his double axel. And now, when we get to the solo jumps, we'll see that Conti and Mashi had very strong solo jumps, as did Hasi and Volodin, and both of them were a little bit better than Miura and Kihara, but not by a lot. The spins, very similar. The throw jumps, you'll see that Hasi and Volodin had the best throw jumps here. They were tied actually with Meltik and Abrolava for the best scoring at throw jumps in the free skate. And you'll see that, of course, with the second throw that went awry from Miura and Kihara, again, that was a place where Conti and Mashi did better than them overall. If you look at the lifts, this is where you'll really see the difference. So the first lift, you have Miura and Kihara scoring higher than both Hasi and Volodin and Conti and Mashi, who scored very similarly. If you look at the second lift, you'll see that Hasi and Volodin scored a little bit better than Miura and Kihara, with Conti and Mashi being significantly lower than the other 2. And then with the third lift, again, it was very much the same. Conti and Mashi were lower, not crazy lower, but lower than both of the other 2 teams. And that's really where they lost the title here, was on their lifts. They just don't have the same speed and flow in the lifts that the other 2 teams do. They struggle a little bit at times in terms of the entry into the lift, and their flow and exit out of it isn't as strong either. I don't know that that's something that they can change a lot of in a couple of months either. I think if they just continue to do what they do, bringing the same performance that they brought here, the same cleanliness that they brought here, and maybe just a little less hesitation on a couple of those lifts, they're going to be on the podium. What color it's going to be is going to be up to the other teams, but they're going to be on the podium. All right, let's talk about the other teams here. And 4th place was Anastasia Maltikina and Luca Buralaba of Georgia, who have had a very strong season up until Skate America Free Skate. And kind of what we've been seeing from them, what I said in the preview, was that when the lights get big, they get smaller. They make more mistakes. And it happened here again. They had another shaky lift in that free skate again. That just makes me feel like we're flirting with disaster. I know it didn't get up at Skate America. They had the big, scary trip in their earlier Grand Prix. They had another kind of dodgy moment in this one too. And it just feels like sometime this season, we're going to see disaster out of them. I hope that that's not the case, but it just does not feel secure. I don't feel secure watching it. And I don't know what's going on there exactly either. But it just always seems like when the moment is big, that there's always a little bit of a mistake from them somewhere. And it might just be in the levels, not getting the levels that everyone else is getting. That, of course, like I said, in the short program is a huge, huge deal. Their throws are really fantastic. They, like I said, were the highest scoring throws with Minerva and Nikita. For them, it was just a little bit of an issue with the side-by-side triple toes. That group 5 lift that they've been struggling with, they only got a level 2 on, only a level 1 on their death spiral. not enough variations on the pair spin, ended up with a V, and that dramatically impacts the base value. So while they got 136 here in the free skate, which is a really good score, without a really major mistake, just a lot of little things getting nickel and dimed here. So they were definitely disappointed. They were disappointed with their 75 in the short program too. But I think it's one thing when you go into a Grand Prix as one of the top two teams, and then when you come to Grand Prix final and there's at least four other teams who are stronger than you, you're probably not going to get that 78 score that they want really, really bad. But they've really got to work on their levels and their consistency in these big events. They're going to have another opportunity at Europeans to make a statement before the Olympics. They're going to have the team event. Also, we'll see what they look like. In fifth place was Pavlova and Shevchenko of Hungary, and they did absolutely nothing wrong here. Really, they're just outmatched. They're made some strides in that second mark for sure, but definitely not where these other teams are, who have won bigger titles, shown better skating skills than what we have seen from them. But it was a good competition for them. They had a strong short program. Every single team in the short program scored over 70 points, which was really fantastic. And they were fourth after the short program. They only got a level 3 on their death spiral. Really good with the levels for them in the short program. The free skate, they have the highest scoring side-by-side jumps in the competition. That's always a really big strength for them. Hasn't been as strong this season as it has been in the past, but here they were just spot on the money. Had just a little issue with their throw luts and a couple of level issues in other places. They also ended up with a V on their pair spin as well. But 135 points was the season's best for them. It's the best that we've seen them this season. They're a team that I felt like could always sneak in if other teams make mistakes, but none of the teams ahead of them really made big enough mistakes that allowed them to move up. Sixth place, disappointingly so, was Deanna Stellato and Max Deschamps of Canada. And it feels like they're losing a lot of momentum at this point. They just have not been able to recapture the magic that they had 2 seasons ago. And it's not even about the programs. It's really, at this point, it's the execution. Just too many mistakes, especially in the side-by-side jumps for them. And had a fall in the throw in the free skate. They just look a bit out of sorts, and it just feels like it's slipping away from them at this point. I don't really consider them to be a medal contender at this point right now for the Olympics, and because we just haven't seen them really put it all together really well, and these other teams are skating so much better than they are right now. So it was unfortunate to see, but that's where we're at. All right, I'm going to switch gears to ice dance, and this one was spicy. It was won by Madison Chock and Evan Bates, perhaps a little surprisingly. I definitely expected the French team to win, and they might have won were it not for a mistake, but I'll get to that in a second. Let's talk about Maddie and Evan first. I will say the tech panel here, very different than what we have seen the last 3 weeks or so at the Grand Prix. So we were back to seeing levels 2s and 3s. We've got a level 4 from the tech panel. And Maddie and Evan and their rhythm dance, I thought this is the best that this rhythm dance has looked by far. I really thought that they were strong, actually agreed with them winning the rhythm dance. And when the French team came out and got 87 points in their rhythm dance right before them, I thought, well, it's going to be interesting to see how they do, where they slot, because we've been seeing them mostly about within 84 points this season. And they, like I said, they skated really well. So I wasn't surprised to see them go ahead, even though an 88 was a lot higher than what we've seen them get so far this season. I got to say, in this event, I'm just kind of like, in my mind, I'm focused on the placements and less about the scores, because I feel like the scores are just not even real. And I'm just kind of focusing on the placements more so than anything else, and not trying to get too utterly carried away with the scores. The free dance, I'm still just not sold on this flamenco free dance from them. It is just my least favorite free dance, not just of this Olympic quad, but I feel like if I go back to last Olympic quad, I liked the Alien and Astronaut and the Snake Dance and maybe even Elvis better than this. I don't hate it. I don't even dislike it. I'm just not there yet. Now, Alien and Astronaut did not at all come together for me until like the Olympics. Like even at nationals, I just was not sold on that program. And the wind and the fire and all of that didn't come together for me until like Four Continents and that season. I've watched it a couple of times, the performance here, and I don't know. I don't know. The skirt doesn't make me as nervous as it did the first rendition of the skirt, but it still feels like we're flirting with disaster. Like I can even see, because they fell on the sliding movement that they do in the very last piece of their program in their run through at Skate America. And so I now notice that Evan is picking up the skirt during that move. My eyes shouldn't be going to that. I shouldn't be watching for trying to avoid wardrobe malfunctions. In terms of the skating, I think that there are some things that they do well in this performance. I actually like the character step. I really like that they do it earlier in the program, not at the end of the program. I don't love their lifts in this as much as I have enjoyed their lifts the last couple of seasons. I just thought they were much cooler in their jazz piece and in their Pink Floyd piece than are in this program. But of course, Laurence and Guillaume actually had the highest scoring lifts, and their lifts look like nothing to me. So the judges have completely different criteria than clearly we do as fans. All this to say that, is this an Olympic gold medal winning routine? I don't know, because I really expected for them to finish second and for the real question to be, how far away are they from Laurence and Guillaume? Are they a point and a half away, and it feels like there's a gap that they can close, or are they 4 or 5 points away? I think what we can get from this competition, even with Laurence and Guillaume's mistake, is that it's going to be a close battle. And I think that the roadmap for Maddie and Evan to win is they've got to win the rhythm dance. They cannot come from behind and beat this team. That is not going to happen. They have to give themselves a little bit of padding to lose the free dance to Laurence and Guillaume, and hope that their lead from the rhythm dance would hold them over, kind of like it did 2 seasons ago at Worlds with Piper and Paul, where Piper and Paul win the free dance with that Wuthering Heights free dance, but they can't overcome the lead that Maddie and Evan had in the rhythm dance. I think that's the only way that they win, outside of a mistake, which could happen with a newer team. We'll see. This obviously is going to give them some more confidence. They get a win over them. Now, this is the last time that we're going to see them internationally, whereas we're going to see Laurence and Guillaume, which I'll go ahead and move on to them, at Europeans. They're going to have an opportunity to skate clean and put up a big number before the Olympics, unlike Maddie and Evan. But we'll talk about them here. In their rhythm dance, they did make some changes to the beginning of their program so that it did not get scored as their choreographic rhythm sequence again. Skated very well here, no mistakes. They were about a point out of the lead going into the free dance, and the free dance was going very well until going into the very last element, Laurence tripped on her skirt of her dress and fell. Guillaume didn't go down with her, got it right back up. They get into their choreographic lift, which did not score as well for them as it has scored on their 2 previous occasions. So it obviously affected that. And you knew when they went down that was it for them, unless Maddie and Evan also made a mistake. It was one of those things where it was in between elements, right? It wasn't on an element, but it also felt disruptive. Like people always go back to the Maddie and Evan free dance from the 2023 World, where they had that fluke fall in the middle, but it just didn't really disrupt the program. Where this felt like it disrupted the program and the flow, especially since they had been so well skated before that point. And they end up scoring 126, which is well below what we saw them get in France at 133. Now, if you were to break down what they would have scored, it would have been very, very close, likely, between them and Chalk and Bates. because they lost a point, of course, for her fall. The lift that they got here, they got like 3.83 is what they scored on this lift. At both Finlandia and at Grand Prix France, they scored just over 5 points for that very same lift. So that's like 1.2 points there. So now we're at 2.2 points. And then their PCS was 3 points below Maddie and Evan, which would have been at least that, if not up to a point more than that. So they are somewhere between 5.2 to 6.2 points that they lost with that fall. They did also have an additional deduction for an extended lift. That was going to be there anyway. So if we're talking extremely about just how that fall impacted their score, an extra 5 points would have put them right at what Maddie and Evan got. An extra 6 points would have put them a point ahead, and they were just a little over a point behind. So it likely would have been a margin very similar to what we had for the third place, either in Laurence and Guillaume's favor or in Chalk and Bates' favor. So for me, after the rhythm dance, it was very, very clear what message that this judging panel is sending. And it's that we've got a 2-horse race for gold, and we've got a 2-horse race for bronze. Where do Guinaud and Fabry fit into this? Do they fit into this? We don't know. We'll get a better idea when we get to Europeans. But that's kind of where we're at. So let's talk about this decision for third place, which has been very controversial. Third place team here was Fair and Gibson, which doesn't completely surprise me, just because they always seem to skate very consistently, and they oftentimes will capitalize off of other teams' either mistakes, or they capitalize off of other teams being judged down. Okay? And here, I thought they were really, really good, especially in the free dance. This is as much as I have enjoyed this Scottish free dance all season. Like, the music has annoyed me. I just haven't really been in it. I thought they did a really, really strong here. The issue becomes with poor Piper and Paul, who were fourth here. And it started, of course, in the rhythm dance, because they were just a little bit ahead of Lila and Lewis after the rhythm dance. And they did go back to I'm Too Sexy in their rhythm dance. I don't know why, but they did. I thought it was a better performance that we've seen for them. There's still something in that midline step that I want more from them, but I thought it was their best performance of this program this season. The free dance, again, strong performance. For me, this program is boring. That does not impact their skating. Their skating is great. Okay. The lifts look very good, and they end up fourth. And they literally end up fourth by like 600ths of a point. Like, it's so close. It's insane. But this is the problem that I have. Okay. 8 months ago, we're at Worlds, 9 months ago, if I can do math correctly. And they are pushing Chalk and Bates for the world title, right? 11 months ago, or 10 months ago, whenever Four Continents was, they actually beat Chalk and Bates, okay? So why is it that because we have a new team in the mix, that somehow they have been relegated to competing with Fair and Gibson? That's the problem that I have. If Piper and Paul were third here, and they got the very same similar score, and they just bested Fair and Gibson by 600ths of a point, I would still have the exact same issue. Okay? I would have the exact same issue. I do not understand why, if you insert one team, that another team has to be sacrificed for that to happen. This should either be a 3-way race for first between these 3 teams, Gilles and Poirier, Chalk and Bates, and Fournier-Baudry Cizeron, or it should be Fournier-Baudry and Cizeron on their own, and Chalk and Bates and Gilles and Poirier, as it has been all quad. I do not understand why Gilles and Poirier have been dropped. Now, I know there's lots of talk about politics, and Ice Academy of Montreal has Fear and Gibson and Fournier Beaudry Cizeron, and they have Chalk and Bates. This is the funny thing, right? When these two teams retire, because it appears Fournier Beaudry and Cizeron are planning to still go on, when Chalk and Bates and Gillis and Poirier retire at the end of this season, the new Canada team number 1 is an Ice Academy of Montreal team. It's no longer a non-IM team, okay? And US team number 2, let's just say it's Zingis and Kolesnik because they have the most momentum for that position right now. They're an Igor team. They're not an Ice Academy of Montreal team. So if politics is really the driver, and it very well may be, then we're going to see a lot of shift next season because all of a sudden Canada has a very different position than they have right now. And US has a very different position than where they are right now, based upon the fact that they're about to gain a number 1 team for Canada that's at Ice Academy of Montreal, and US is about to lose a number 1 team from Ice Academy of Montreal. So it'll be very interesting to see if all of a sudden Zingis, Kolesnik get dropped, or if Carrere and Ponomarenko come back up because they're technically an Ice Academy of Montreal team at the London, Ontario campus. What we were thinking we were going to see before Fournier Beaudry and Cizeron came back was Fear and Gibson versus Lajoie and Legas. Those were going to be the 2 premier teams that were going to be duking it out next year. And what does that look like? And that's basically what you have right now. You have the Brits going, I've got to push Canada down, and you have Canada going, I got to push the Brits down. But Canada's also probably got to be kind of confused because the last 3 years they've been trying to push the US down. And so now that it's so confusing. And for the average fan, they are so frustrated. So very frustrated. Because you have this team that was competing for world titles that has now been relegated to compete for bronze. And for no other reason other than another team has entered into the building. And it makes no sense. Makes no sense. So Piper posted on her Instagram story this quote: "A sport has its own built-in integrity, doesn't need an artificial one. Athletics carries its own set of truths, and those truths are diminished and manipulated by people with agendas." And then Caroline also shared this on her social media, on Twitter as well. The ISU page, their Instagram was flooded with lots of comments from fans that were very, very unhappy with what has happened with Piper and Paul. And I hope that they're not too discouraged from this. And this is nothing against Fear and Gibson. In fact, there's a lot of vitriol out there, and it's unfairly directed towards Fear and Gibson. They're not doing the judging. Okay? And some people, if you prefer Fear and Gibson, that's okay. Other fans don't rip people that like Fear and Gibson just because they like Fear and Gibson. They're allowed to have their own opinion. And if you like Piper and Paul better, that's also fine. But taking the subjectivity out of who you like as people or whose programs you like, and we just look at skating skills, what the judging panel has said is that Piper and Paul have regressed from where they were, which was one of the top 2 teams in the world, to now being 3, 4th, 5th, and that just doesn't make sense. And that's where the frustration comes from. Okay, moving on to our last 2 teams here. 5th place was Reed and Ambrilevicius of Lithuania. They had a great competition here. They scored really what we've seen them score at their best all season: 80 points in the rhythm dance, 120 points in the free skate. I saw so much love for their rhythm dance online. On Friday, people just really, not only did they think this is the best rhythm dance of the season, a lot of people like this particular program as their favorite ice dance program this season, which fair. I think a lot of people are like, if you take the top programs, Piper and Paul included, Fear and Gibson included, Guinard and Fabry included, Chalk and Bates, I don't think anybody's super excited about any of those teams' material this season. They're fine, but I think we could all pick other programs from this Olympic quad that we like better than the ones that they presented this season. And so for Reed and Ambrilevicius to have 2 vehicles that are very strong for them and that people really like, think bodes very well for them. They're 100% in the mix for a medal at Europeans. I think it's going to be that third place spot between them, Guenard and Fabry, should be very spicy. I personally hope Guenard and Fabry are fighting more for a silver medal with Fear and Gibson than they're fighting with the bronze for Reed and Ambrulevicius. But like I said, they're definitely going to be in that mix, and deservedly so. They've had a really fantastic season. Going to the Milano qualifier actually made them way better, in that they had to be ready much sooner than they would be in an average season. And then the last place team here, last but not least, was Zingis and Kolesnik of the US, and they had a very weird call in the rhythm dance. They got an S call on their midline step sequence, which Mark was very surprised of on the broadcast. Lots of surprise and confusion online, and what most people have come to the conclusion of with videos and things like that were that they touched inadvertently at some point at the beginning of the sequence, and therefore the call, which was for an illegal element or move, and so that lost them 2 points off of their score, which was wild, very strange. And from my understanding, they've been doing this all season, and it just hasn't been called before now. Nobody's caught it. Obviously, they're going to change it going forward. Just super weird for them. But they had a really good competition here again. Other than that weird call, strong in the rhythm dance, great free dance. I really love their character step. I don't love everybody's character step. In fact, as a whole, I don't love the character step element. I think it's silly most of the time, but I really like theirs. I just especially like the beginning, and their musicality is just really, really fantastic. And this team, to me, has pretty much punched their ticket to the Olympics. And if this goes the way that we have seen this go in the past in terms of USA, I think they're pretty much locked in for silver at nationals as well. What I think about is Davis and White. Davis and White won nationals in 2009 because Belbin and Augusto had an injury and they weren't there. And then Davis and White did much better in the fall. In fact, they won Grand Prix final going into nationals. Merrill had a big twizzle error in the rhythm dance, and they really should have been second behind Belbin and Augusto, but they were propped up because they were Grand Prix final champions going into the Olympics as the great Olympic hope. And I say all that to say that I kind of feel like something similar might happen with Emilia and Vadim at nationals. If they were to have a little bit of a mistake, they'd probably be held up just based upon the season that they've had. Now, hopefully they go and skate lights out like they've been doing all season, and it won't be an issue. But it's hard for me to see a situation where they are not on the Olympic team. All right. Pamchenko Awards for pairs. Definitely going out to Conti and Mashi. I'll also give a little honorable mention to Hasim Volodin for their free skate, which was, like I said, the highest scoring free skate that we've seen in this Olympic quad. But for Conti and Mashi, 2 clean programs, really fabulous, connected with the music, with each other. It was really, really good to see from them. And for dance, Chalk and Bates had a very good rhythm dance. Piper and Paul had a really good free dance. I thought Fear and Gibson had a really good free dance. I'm going to give it to Reed and Ambrulevicius. See, even though they were 5th here, I thought that in terms of just both programs, I just thought they skated really well. They didn't seem like they had any pressure on them. And yeah, I'm going to give it to Reed and Ambrulevicius. All right, that completes my coverage of the pairs and the ice dance events at Grand Prix Final. I'll be back with the singles disciplines. And I said I was going to make a special episode for my 200th episode, but it just felt like it was going to be weird to come out a couple of days before Grand Prix Final. I felt like it would kind of get lost in the madness. And so that'll come out in a few more days. I'm actually going to be ranking the top women figure skaters of all time. One of those fun sports illustrated ESPN things to do is to rank always who are the greatest athletes of all time, who are the greatest football players of all time, what are the greatest games of all time, all these things. And so I'm going to do that for women's skating in terms of post compulsory era. Okay, I'm not going to go back to Sonia Henney days and Janet Lynn and all that kind of post compulsory, the top women's skaters of all time as I see it. So you'll see that in a few days also. All right. As always, thank you guys for listening. You can find me on all the socials at Ice Skate Podcast. You can send me an email at thecuttingedgepod@gmail.com. I hope you have a good rest of your week. And as always, let me know what some of your favorite things were from this past weekend. And you can also let me know what you disliked about this past weekend, because unfortunately there was a lot to dislike too. Feel free to vent. All right. Bye-bye.